Allah, 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 ما لنا مولى سوى الله. الله، 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 ما لنا مولى سوى الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قال لقمان لابنه وهو يعظه يا بني لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم. صدق الله العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most gracious, the most merciful. Peace and blessings be upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us life for another Jummah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sustaining us and for giving us such a luxurious life. Alhamdulillah. Despite all the calamities and difficulties going throughout the world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has still kept us safe and sound. Alhamdulillah. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He continues to shower His mercies upon us and that He keeps all forms of trials and tribulations away from us. So today's topic, discussion is about the advices that Luqman alayhi salam gave to his son. So I know you guys had some discussion regarding Hajj previously, so I didn't want to mention Hajj. I figured this is one topic that we could all take advantage from, inshallah. And these advices that Luqman alayhi salam gave to his son, they're all applicable to all of us as well, right? So not only we try to implement these in our own lives, but also we try to give these same advices to our children, inshallah. Our spouses, our children, our friends, whoever that we know of, right? So Allah mentions ad-dinun nasiha, right? Our entire religion is all about nasiha, giving good advices to people, right? If people started caring about each other, then the society will become much better, right? But the problem is nowadays, it's all about individualism. Everyone just cares about themselves, right? They don't care about what's happening in their neighborhood, what's happening even in their own household. The parents, they don't care about what the children are doing. So that whole aspect of advising and the whole aspect of nasiha is gone from society. So we need to bring it back. And the best way to bring it back is by starting with our own family, with our own siblings, our own children, right? If we do that, inshallah, when you give someone an advice, do you hear it yourself or no? You hear it yourself. So in fact, you are the first person to hear it. The sound travels to you before it travels to anyone else. So it makes an impact upon yourself as well. And then it can make an impact on others. A lot of times, I talk to you guys here, and later on I'm still thinking about those things, right? Other people might have forgotten about it, but at least I remember what I said to you guys, right? I remember that I said certain thing to you guys and I myself am lacking in that. So similarly, when you advise someone else, you realize that, hey, I myself am lacking in this field. I'm giving this advice, and there's nothing wrong with giving an advice that you yourself are behind in. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes the only way it's wrong is if you don't intend on implementing that on yourself at all. then it can come off a little bit hypocritical, right? But if you have intention of implementing that, but you're just behind, you're also struggling, and you're reminding someone else of that, then there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Because otherwise, then there won't be, like, you'd have to perfect yourself in a field to be able to advise others. Imagine it takes you 20 years to perfect yourself in your prayer, and then you're telling your children to pray. It might be too late for that, right? So it's okay for yourselves to be imperfect in a certain thing, and you can still advise others about it. But you should have the intention of improving it yourself. So one of the things that Luqman alayhi salam had was wisdom. Wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Luqman alayhi salam wisdom. In some narrations we find that Luqman alayhi salam was given the option of being a prophet or just have wisdom. So he chose to just have wisdom. Even though being a prophet comes with wisdom as well, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. So he picked wisdom. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him a lot of wisdom. In this world, if someone wants to attain wisdom, does it just come by itself? No. The ingredient of wisdom is knowledge and action. So if you attain knowledge and you implement upon that knowledge for a long time, then you have wisdom in that field. And it could be any field. You can attain the knowledge of engineering, mechanical engineering. You still don't have wisdom. And then you implement it, you work on it for a decade, then you have wisdom in that field. So knowledge plus action equals wisdom. So knowledge plus action has to happen for a long time. So over a long period of time with that experience, you get wisdom. And with that wisdom, you have a lot of insight in a certain field. Things that are not written in the books, you already know that from your experience, right? Similarly, so that's what happened with Luqman alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him skip all of that step. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him wisdom directly. So he didn't have to go through that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him directly. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him wisdom. So out of his wisdom, he advises his son. And some of those advices are present in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions some of those advices in the Quran in Surah Luqman. So we'll look at those. And then there's other narrations where we find several other advices that he gave to his son. The ulama, they have collected over 20 advices. And he has even given some advices to his son on his deathbed. Before he was dying, he called his son and he said that here are some more things that I need to tell you. So we won't have enough time to go over all of them, but inshallah we'll cover some of them so that it could benefit us and we could pass these along to our own children, our spouses, our siblings, our parents, whoever we meet, inshallah. So the first wisdom, the first piece of advice that he gave to his son that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions in the Quran is regarding shirk, right? Which is the biggest, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that he says that inna shirka la dhulmun azim, that the shirk, this associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the biggest major sin anyone could ever commit. And in today's society, shirk is there, but another issue that's very prevalent in today's society, and that is the issue of atheism as well, right? So shirk is one extreme where a person believes in a God, but also he associates partner with that God. Another extreme on the other side of the spectrum is atheism, where a person completely denies existence of any God. So that's also an issue that's very common in this society, especially in the Western society. And even in the Eastern society, it's getting more and more common. So our children, they intermingle with their friends, and some of them might have different beliefs, right? with their classmates, and they go to colleges and they study different courses, and some of them could, maybe the teachers and professors could say things that could plant that seed of atheism in their heart, right? So we need to always remind them of the harms of atheism, and we have to just basic simple reminder that all of this existence cannot come into existence on its own, right? The way you go to imagine if you go to a town and the whole town is deserted and there's no one at the gas station and there's houses but they're all empty, you're not going to assume that it just came out of nowhere, right? You automatically use your intellect to come to a conclusion that there was someone, right? Similarly, this whole creation could not come into existence on its own, and we need to keep reminding this to our children from a young age. And then as soon as they grow older, they attend these courses, they find these friends who say otherwise, their belief is strong. So in fact, they'll tell them that, hey, this, how could it be? And it's possible that they can change their belief. It's possible that your children can change their belief. But if we never cared, we're always busy with making money, we're always busy working, then what happens? The children, they take into account their friends' religion, their classmates' religion, right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, "Ar-rajulu ala dini khalili," right? So when your child has a friend that has those beliefs and you did not care about fixing that, you did not care about reminding your child about the proper aqidah of our religion, then that will happen. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from that. Second one, he mentions regarding the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He mentions that even the tiniest thing that you could do, the tiniest action that you could do, he compares it with the seed. With the seed, he compares it that a seed that is hidden inside a rock. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even has knowledge of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring that forth on the day of judgment. So this is something we all know, but sometimes we don't realize it. So we could take it in two directions. On the positive directions, if you look at it, you could do something very tiny that's good. You could do something very tiny that's good, and you realize that people are not recognizing it. Oh, how come he didn't give me recognition for this, right? I also did this. I also cleaned the bathroom, for example. I also fixed his bookshelf. So that person never recognized it. But guess what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will recognize it on the day of judgment. You will see the reward for that as well, inshallah. So you should also always realize that even the tiniest thing that we do, you don't have to worry about people's recognition. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will recognize it. And we should ingrain this in our children, that they should do all these actions. Anything that they do, remind them that even if mama, daddy did not see that good thing that you did, you cleaned up the toys, we did not notice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala noticed, and He will reward you. On the flip side, if you do something bad, the tiniest of the bad things someone does, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also aware of that. So we should also remind the children of that as well, that sometimes they could hide in the closet and maybe eat a few extra chocolates. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of that. So even if the parents are not aware of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of that. So these are some of the examples. A lot of times we think that just by saying these things, it might not have an impact, but these things have a great impact, especially if you keep saying it every now and then. Every time you find an opportunity of, like, maybe your child lied about something, then you give them an advice about lying, how lying is bad. That's one of the advices that Luqman alayhi salam gave to his son, that lying, when a person lies, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away the nur from their face. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that a Muslim could be what's the word for coward? A Muslim could be coward, but a Muslim could be miserly, but a Muslim could never be a liar, right? So that's something we could remind our children, we could remind ourselves that lying is such a major and such a bad thing that we ourselves stay away from it, remind our children to stay away from it. So the second advice he gave was regarding the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of all being all-knowing. Even the tiniest good thing that you do, the tiniest bad thing that we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of that. Next advice he gave that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran is regarding the prayer. He mentions that make sure you fulfill your prayer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentioned in another place in the Quran, also mentions وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ, that command your family regarding the prayer. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also, just commanding is not enough. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَاسْتَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا, that be consistent upon it. So be consistent upon the prayer. And you can also look at it like being consistent upon reminding them. Always keep reminding them. Every time they fall behind, they slack a little bit, you remind them that prayer is what separates us from a non-Muslim. Prayer in a day-to-day life, if you look at a 24-hour of a Muslim, if you take a 24-hour of a non-Muslim, if you remove the prayer out of the Muslim's life, it looks exactly the same, right? Like a regular weekday, right? Weekend might be different. They might drink alcohol. The Muslim might not drink alcohol, but a regular weekday, like a Monday, he also went to job. He came back from work, he took some rest. He also came back from work, he took some rest. He ate lunch, he ate breakfast, he ate dinner. They did exactly the same thing, right? That's if you take the prayer out of the picture. But if you put the prayer in the picture, then that's the difference. So it mentions that the difference between kufr, the disbelief, and a person in belief is removing the prayer, the lack of prayer. So we must make sure that we ourselves are punctual regarding the prayer, and our children and everyone in the household, because if one person is behind in the prayers in the household, the head of the household will be responsible. Understand? So if you think that you're praying, you're waking up for prayer, and your child can sleep, your adult child can sleep, then you're responsible. You'll be given the sin. Imagine you prayed that prayer, but you also got a copy of the sin of that prayer. Right? That's because you did not care about your family. And even if you have someone else living, let's say your nephew came, he's staying the night. So it's your responsibility to even wake up the nephew for Fajr prayer. Understand? Because as soon as that nephew came in your household, his parent, they left it upon your responsibility. So anything good that he is missing, anything further that is missing, is your responsibility. Anything bad he is committing in your household is your responsibility. How come you're not stopping him? So it's all our responsibility. So Luqman alayhi salam, along with the prayer, he also mentions that make sure you forbid evil, you command good. You command good, forbid evil. And then lastly he says that make sure that if there's any difficulty that befalls you, you have patience, because it's one of the biggest things that you could have is patience. A lot of times people, they lack patience. Anytime any difficulty happens, they lose it. They start screaming, right? And then later on they calm down, but the calming down of the later on doesn't help. The patience is the initial time. As soon as a calamity happens to you, any difficulty, you keep your calm. What do you say when you have some difficulty happen to you? What do you say? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. That's the procedure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed to all of us. Any difficulty happens, you say Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I'll mention one more advice. This is not in the Quran, but this is separate from different narrations that we find, that Luqman alayhi salam mentions to his son that sit in the gathering of the ulama, sit in the gathering of the scholars. Because when you sit in the gathering of the scholars, what happens? It benefits you the way rain benefits a barren land. The way rain benefits a barren land, similarly, just sitting in the company of the scholars benefits you. The same thing that a father could be telling the son for days, and then he goes and sits in the company of a scholar, he listens to it one time, and it makes an effect. Right? It's just maybe the way of saying it, right? And maybe the saying of the scholar combined with his life experience, it just packs a punch. Just packs a punch. So that's why it's highly recommended that not only our children, we ourselves, we try to sit in as many different gatherings of the ulama as possible. Even if you fall asleep in that gathering, you'll still come out with some benefit, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy will descend upon that gathering. And will that mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have differentiate? Oh, this person is sleeping, I will not fall upon this person, and this person is listening to it carefully, I will fall upon this person. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy at that point is general, unrestricted. So a person who's sitting in the back corner and just dozing off, he's also leaving with some benefit. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that the example of good company is like going to a fragrance store. You go to buy a fragrance store, right? Perfume store. If you don't buy anything, you still leave from there smelling good, right? So similarly, good company, the company of the ulama, even if you don't listen to anything, you'll still leave with the noor and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The opposite is staying away from bad company. Even if you don't, like it's like going to a blacksmith. You know, there's spark and he's working with fire and metal, right? And then there's a lot of stink over there. So even if you don't get harmed, you still come back with a bad smell. Or you could come back with a spark, maybe like a little hole on your clothing, right? So that's the example of bad company. So he says that he emphasizes that make sure that you have good company. You sit in the gathering of the ulama. You make sure that you stay away from the bad gathering. So we ourselves, we make sure of that, and make sure our children do that. Then automatically there's nothing left but good. Our children would turn out good. We ourselves, if there's something lacking in ourselves, we all automatically will see a huge change in our lifestyle, in our life, in our a'mal. We'll see a big change in the entirety of ourselves, inshallah. We'll stop here, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to do amal upon it, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give our children the amal upon this as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to spread anything good that we learn, we make sure we spread to others. If you go home and tell anything that you learned today to your spouse and your children, that will ensure that at least you remember. If you don't tell anyone, you'll probably forget. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.